Hey guys, today we're talking about the proposed changes in US soccer age groupings from birth year to school year. So let's go. Okay, so let's just go through this statement that was a joint statement from US Club Soccer, US Youth Soccer, and AYSO, American Youth Soccer Organization. These are the three biggest governing bodies of youth soccer in the country. The fact that we have these three governing bodies is part of the problem. We actually have more than three governing bodies, but these are the three biggest. And this is probably one of the first times I've ever seen them actually work together. It's almost impossible for parents to navigate between these three without help from clubs. But let's forget all of that and let's just go through the statement. U.S. Club Soccer, U.S. Youth Soccer, AYSO statement on the forthcoming U.S. decision regarding age group formation by school year versus calendar year. So they start by talking about how in 2017, they actually went from school year to birth year. Okay. And they're saying, since that change was made, they've been reviewing it. And really over the past few months, U.S. Soccer, at the request of its Technical Development Committee, has engaged in a review of that decision. So they continue on to say that all three of these organizations have been in constant communication about this topic. They also underline this statement, which is kind of interesting. We believe that any decision should be made as a collective with as many youth organizations as possible, and it is our intention to do so. As the chair and vice chair of the U.S. Technical Development Committee, which I mentioned earlier, Mike Kulina and Louis Matias, who are members of U.S. Club Soccer and U.S. Youth Soccer, respectively. They have been involved in direct conversation with the U.S. Soccer's board of directors. Lastly, they say that, this is a topic that's going to be on the agenda at the November 22nd, 2024 U.S. Soccer Board of Directors meeting. In order to get an understanding of what's going on, it's important to discuss what happened 7 years ago. So as I mentioned, in August 2017, they switched. They were school calendar year registrations. So you'd be essentially playing with, your same grade, to then going to birth year. So if you were born in January 1st through December 31st of whatever year it was, that was the same age group. And so why did they do that, right? So let's kind of go through this article. This is right from US Soccer website. This was published August 1st, 2017, okay? And, it just starts out by talking about what I just talked about, that, we use calendar year, or we use school year. Now we're going to use actual birth year, not school calendar year. What I really want to sort of highlight here is this area where it says, why are youth soccer registration standards changing? The justification they're giving here is that the change is aiming to support player development, and it goes hand in hand with the new standards for small-sided games. And what they're talking about there is the 7v7 to 9v9 format that we're currently using, which I would actually argue is not small-sided games. Video for another time. What the birth year registration ensures is that players are training and playing with the proper age group, each with their own developmental needs. I don't know what that even means. The new standard also strives to lessen the relative age effect. So here's the thing. Relative age effect is basically where you have somebody playing in the same age group who's significantly younger. Okay, so there's a selection bias towards players born earlier in the calendar year. And I would argue that hasn't changed at all. Basically all we're doing now is shifting that. So where players who were born in January, who might even be 11 months older than their peers, some of their peers, they are going to be more mature, more developed usually. And so those players sometimes are picked, and this whole initiative was meant to reduce that, and it really hasn't done that at all. Another reason for this was the United States Development Academy, which doesn't exist anymore, but there was a push to move towards more of a FIFA standard, and that's even a little bit of a misnomer because not all countries under FIFA go by this. In fact, there's some prominent countries like England and France who actually go by school year in terms of how they register their players. But if you go to a FIFA-sanctioned international tournament, for example, and you are a U17 team, all of those players need to be born in the January to December time frame. It's not based on school year. So technically, there could have been some mild disadvantages for the United States in those tournaments. But, this is, affecting 1% maybe, probably not even, of the players in the country. So it really, doesn't make a lot of sense to use that as any type of justification. So just lastly, they make the point that it's going to make this easier to understand. So for players born, in different parts of the same year, they oftentimes could have been on different teams. And so obviously sometimes they were in different grades. And they say this makes it easier for parents to figure out where their child should be playing, and for both coaches and parents to become more aware of how players develop based on age and how individual needs may vary. The biggest reason why U.S. Soccer and the youth governing bodies would want to go back to the school calendar age grouping system is to avoid the trap player. So if you're not familiar with this term, it is essentially a player who is without a team. And this usually happens in 8th graders. So if you're an 8th grader who has a birthday that is later on in the year, and you actually play with 9th graders because that's the same year you were born, in the fall of that year, you don't have a team because the 9th graders are playing high school soccer, and you don't actually have a club team because the club team waits until after the high school season to start training and playing games. This can often sometimes happen as well when you're a senior and those that you've been playing with go on to graduate. Another reason that they're thinking about doing this is that in older teams, especially in high school, you have bloated rosters, again, because of the trap players. So you'll just combine age groups, and then you get huge numbers of teams, 20, 22 players on a team, and that's really too many players for enjoyment, for development, for playing time, situations like this. Okay, so we already talked about really the major pro in this particular discussion, which is there's no trap players. Along those same lines, kids can play with their classmates. So from a social standpoint, this is something that players usually want. It also has the potential to make the registration process, which is a mess in the United States, a little bit more streamlined. So if everybody's on the same calendar, it could make it easier. It also has the potential to make college recruiting a little bit easier because colleges will know when they're watching a team that all those players are in the same grade. In terms of cons, there are not a ton. I mean, the main con is the short-term impact it could have to break teams up, which is not inconsequential. I mean, it's going to affect many players. The other thing that this will do is affect our most elite players. So there will be some impacts in terms of international tournaments if potentially a younger player is going on trial to a professional team overseas. But again, these are very small percentages of the overall, soccer population in the country. This is likely to impact the boys' side a little bit more than the girls' side, where the transition from playing, youth, either high school or high level club teams, going to college, and then potentially a very small percentage from college to pros. That pathway is a lot clearer on the girls' side, whereas on the boys' side, on the men's side, it's way more haphazard. So my overall take on this is that changing back to the school year calendar probably is a good idea for 99% of players in this country. However, I would say this, is this really a problem that needed to be solved? Was this such a big deal that it requires, the three governing bodies that I just talked about getting together, having multiple meetings? For me, there are so many bigger issues in youth soccer in this country, mainly the costs of it, pay-to-play model, the ecosystem and the fact that we are not rewarded for developing players, coaching education, and then just in general, how we're approaching player development. It's not how other countries are doing it, And that, to me, is much more important than how we decide to group ages. But that being said, I do think the pros probably outweigh the cons. So guys, what do you think about the proposed change to go back to school calendar age groups? Let me know what you think in the comments and reach out if you have any questions. See you next time.